How about if I just start at the beginning? You could be honest.
Because you know what? They have the sweat equity that went into that memory that they're making with their friends and family. And that's what's important with us. And that's what the I Am Real World's about.
Well, that's a great question. You know, one of the best things about a spring food plot is you get a second chance if it fails.
Chasing Giants with Don Higgins. Brought to you by buyafarm.com, your source for farm, recreational properties, rural homes, and more. By tapping into Don's years of experience, dedication, and commitment, Chasing Giants focuses on the techniques, strategies, and dedication needed to harvest one of God's most amazing creations, world-class whitetails. Now, here is Don and co-host Terry Peer.
Welcome to Chasing Giants, episode 86. Don Higgins on the phone. It is October 10th. Don, we are now I was thinking on the drive home today, we are now 2 years into this little venture that we thought a couple people might want to listen to.
Yeah, it's already grown bigger than I thought it would, and it just seems to keep growing.
It's amazing. It's amazing watching the analytics of the uploads now. We had last week, usually when we have Dr. Strickland on and we kind of promote it or whatever, we have a big spike. But within 24 hours of the last upload, just on podcast platforms alone, within the first 24 hours, which, 12 of that's in the middle of the night, we upload on Sunday night. We had over 10,000 people download it within the first 24 hours. That's not to mention the YouTube platform and the MTech. So just crazy how many people are getting notifications and listening to this thing as soon as it comes out. So we appreciate that. And a lot of that is coming from you guys sharing the word with your friends, leaving reviews or comments, especially on YouTube. We might even talk a little bit about analytics and social media a little bit later in the podcast, but a lot of the spreading of the word of this podcast is coming from our listeners, and we appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you to everyone. And, that's what makes it worthwhile for Terry and I to do this every Sunday evening is the fact that so many of you benefit or at least tune in, and for the entertainment value, maybe, whatever reason.
Well, I know everybody doesn't agree or follow the same kind of thinking that we do on a lot of things, but, you don't have to agree with everything we do or say. Good grief, we don't even agree with each other on everything. But, no, we do try to just keep it real, keep it honest, and I think that's part of the draw, so we appreciate that. If you're listening on the podcast platforms like iTunes or iHeartRadio or any of that, you clicking and writing a review really helps us. And if nothing else on YouTube, leave a comment. The more you guys comment, like, and share and subscribe, the more that stuff will show up in other people's feeds. So helps us out and allows us to help you out a little bit.
Yes, sir. And hunting season is here, Terry. The last podcast we had Brant Ramsey on, who was the winner of the Lester Speed Raffle.
How did that hunt go?
Well, not as good as we would like, but the first time I cannot even remember the last time that I hunted 2 hunts in a row on my farm without seeing deer. It's actually pretty rare to have one hunt where you don't see deer. Brant and I actually had 2 hunts in a row where we did not see a deer on my farm.
Wow.
And so I told him that was a first. But the last evening he was here, we did have a shooter buck about 50, 60 yards from us in the brush. The buck just walked the other way, and I got out the grunt call and tried to bring him in, but he didn't cooperate. But we're not giving up. Brant's coming back, and we're going to make it happen one way or another.
If you were grunting at a buck in October, you were throwing all the stop set at it. I've never seen you grunt at a buck in October.
Well, I wanted Brant to kill that buck really bad because it was a nice one, and I guarantee you he'd have been happy, and so would I. So we tried everything we could, but they just weren't moving good. And, you know, I have him back later in the month, 1st of November, and if that don't work, he'll keep coming back until he gets one. So,
well, talk a little bit about the weather and the crops in your area, because I haven't talked to you much this last week. I need an update about what's kind of been going on up there so I can start kind of following along. What's the weather been and what's the crop situation?
well, the weather today, I think it was 88 degrees here.
Oh, my. It was warmer there than here.
Yeah, it was almost a record high. Might have been a record high. I don't know. And it's been warm, so that's part of the problem. I mean, we've had a couple of cool fronts blow through, and it just brings the temperatures down to normal. Then they go right back up. So that's not good at all. We've had some rain too, which has slowed the harvest a little bit. But if I had to guess, I'm going to say about half of the crops are out of the fields around here. Gotcha. And a lot of combines running today, even though it was Sunday. This afternoon, there was combines running everywhere. So they're getting them out, but we've got rain in the forecast for 3 different days this coming week. I actually hope we miss it all. This has been the wettest year I can ever remember in my entire life. And I've seen some wet periods, you know, where it's wet for 3 or 4 or 5, 6 months, but this entire year has been wet. And we just don't need any more rain at this point.
Well, it stinks that you guys couldn't close the deal with your Lester's Feet winner, and I couldn't do it on mine. But even though we advertised and told everybody these were 3-day hunt only, we're both working with the winners to bring them back to our farms at different point in times to see if we can still get it done. We're going to put every effort together to try to get these guys that won this hunt. It means a lot to us to give them the opportunity to kill a deer. So we're doing everything possible we can to make that happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're planning on having this raffle again next year, and I think it's really important to show everyone that we're going to go out of our way to get these people, whoever wins, to get them a buck. So. Yep. I have no doubt Moran's going to get his chance at a nice buck. It's just we rolled the dice and tried a little bit earlier than I probably should have, but that was my call, and I got to hand it to him. He was willing to jump in his truck and get here at a moment's notice. He lives about 2.5 hours from me, so that made it fairly easy. But right. He showed up when I asked him to.
Yep. So we'll keep plugging away on both of our hunts with our winners. And I'm going to tease it a little bit for all the listeners. For next year's Lester's Feet, we have something huge. So, even though hunting Don's home farm was kind of the grand prize, and hunting my farm was kind of okay because of the chance to get a velvet buck, the thing that we're working on right now with one of the listeners of the podcast that has stepped forward is going to be it's going to be really exciting to have people be able to have a chance to win that. And I have to leave it at that for now. But as we move on a little bit, what's your trail camera situation, buck inventory? Do you have your cameras shifted to your scrapes and rut positions, and what's showed up so far?
Yeah, pretty much. I've got them where they need to be for the rest of the fall. I'm continually checking cameras. I got so many of them out, that I'm always checking some. And it just so happened yesterday I checked one that had not been checked yet. I put it out in July and had not checked it since I put it out. And that was actually a really good buck on that camera. I think he's a 4-year-old based on some past years pictures from that location, and he's a 6x6 with a sticker off of each G2, not real wide but pretty tall rack and long tines. Yeah, but I think he's only a 4-year-old. I'm going to guess that he would score right now in the 170s.
Okay,
but again, he's only a 4-year-old, so that gives me like $4 or $5 now that are 4 years old, and I think will score in the low 170s.
So this is not going to be a target buck this year.
No, those are the ones that'll be giants a year or two down the road. I just can't bring myself to shoot them now.
Are you willing
So I'll
to
let
tell
them
us
go.
whether this is on your home farm or another property? Or
It is not. It's not on my home farm. It's miles away.
So this is, teeing up a little bit of dialogue about the Ones That Got Away series that you're doing on your social media. You know, this is not your home farm that's managed. This is going to be different properties that have neighbors, that there is still a very good chance of this buck getting shot. And that's part of playing this game.
Yep. And you know what? One other thing I want to throw out about some of these cameras I've checked this week. Today after church, I checked a couple cameras. One of them was on my place, one of them was not. But I went to one of these cameras, a Reconyx camera, and I hadn't been to it in 25 days. And I was doing some other stuff and was going to be close on the side-by-side to where this camera was at. And I thought, well, the wind was blowing about 30 miles an hour, covering up any kind of noise, and I could drive right up to this camera. It's on the edge of the woods,
right,
and check it. And so it's right on the edge of the woods. There's a grass strip about maybe 20 feet wide between the woods and a standing cornfield. And along this woods edge, there's several big oak trees, bur oak trees that are dropping those giant bur oak acorns. And so I go and I check this camera, and I open it up and put in my password code, and it shows that I've got 17,764 pictures. And I'm thinking, you got to be kidding me. And I know what's happened is that, these corn stalks have been blowing in the wind and everything, and this camera's just been catching weeds blowing or something, and there's all kinds of false triggers. Well, it was because it'd only been there. I counted it up when I got home. It had been in place 25 days since I last checked it.
right.
Well, I go home and I check it, and I'm telling you what, there probably wasn't 10 pictures that didn't have some animal on it.
Wow.
It was by a big bur oak tree that was losing its acorns, and it was mainly deer, and it was just incredible. In fact, I was so sure the camera wasn't working that when I reset it, I changed the setting on the trigger, the sensitivity on the trigger.
Right.
I knocked it down a notch so it wouldn't catch weeds blowing or whatever. Well, it wasn't weeds at all. It was deer. They were just hammering the acorns under that bur oak tree, as were the coons, and there were some coyotes that came by and some other stuff. But, at least 90% of the pictures were deer. And I don't think I've ever seen, on just a field edge, that number of pictures come off of a trail camera.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's the type of numbers we get when we're running mineral and feed here. That's a lot.
Yep. I was shocked, but I had to throw that story out there.
Well, I think you'll be fine bumping if it's animals causing it. I think you'll be fine bumping your sensitivity down. I don't think that'll hurt you any.
No, I don't either, because it's not like they're passing through in a hurry. They're coming underneath that. And that's why there's so many pictures. They're getting in front of the camera, and they're not leaving. They're just sitting there eating acorns.
Right. So, well, that's pretty cool. There's been a couple big bucks killed. Why don't you talk a little bit about one of our friends from Ohio?
Well, actually, there's two of them in Ohio that were killed this week, or in the past week. We featured Amos Hirschberger here about, was it last week? Or
Yep. We
before?
talked about Amos last week, I believe.
So Amos killed that really unique buck that had the I don't even know what you want to call it, off the one antler. It was like a conglomerate of tines and webbing and stuff coming off the back of the main beam on the one, and it scored 196, and I'm not sure how they even scored it, but giant nonetheless. Well, just a few days later, Amos's son Dwayne, off of the same farm, shoots a buck. Another real dandy. It scored 176, but it was 24 and a quarter inches wide inside.
Wow.
It's a really super buck. I don't think I've shared that one on my social media yet, but I will be in the next couple of days sharing pictures of that deer.
Yeah.
And then our friend Tate Hale, he shot just a toad. I'm not sure what day was that. Maybe Friday.
Yeah, it was over the weekend, I believe.
Yeah, and just, I mean, it was, I don't know how many points it had or what it scores yet, but Tate had sent me pictures of that buck earlier in the summer in velvet, and asked for a little advice and sent me some aerial photos and such. And I told him what I thought, and boy, lo and behold, he ends up killing it right out of the gate. So
yeah.
Congrats to both them guys.
Yeah, our mutual friend of Tate that introduced us all, Rich Hickson, he was I think more ecstatic than Tate was when he killed it. So couldn't happen to a nicer guy. If you guys haven't followed the story of Tate Hale, I recommend you doing it. Former college athlete that had to have one of his legs amputated, and he does some speaking to youth and different groups, but. We think the world of both of those guys, and congratulations on 2 great bucks. But I think what both of them will come back in and say is they didn't push the issue. They went in with the conditions were right. I talked to Rich a little bit about Tate's buck, and I think the hardest thing for people to do is when they have a giant on camera. Be patient. So much of the internet is filled with this run and gun. Go in and kill him before something happens, that you make bad decisions and end up bumping that deer.
Yeah, I think Tate shot his on the first hunt.
Yeah,
he told me he'd been waiting for the right wind. He finally got the right wind, and I don't remember when the Ohio season comes in, but I mean, he waited several days, maybe a couple of weeks,
right,
before he slipped in there. In the first hunt, he gets it done because he was patient and waited for things to be right.
Yeah, I think a lot of people just they start getting impatient, start worrying, and end up making a bad decision trying to close the deal too quick. And if the conditions aren't right, and that buck doesn't feel safe, and you ain't gonna get him. It's not like in the rut where you can roll the dice a little bit. So congratulations to those two and being smart and putting a plan together. So, well, what else is going on?
Well, I want to ask our listeners. I got a prayer request for everyone. Some of you that follow my personal Facebook page, just Don Higgins, might have seen this, but I posted a video. I think it was on Thursday that I posted it, of this young lady locally here that has been battling cancer for 6 years. And I think she was a senior in high school, but I'm not 100% sure. But she just lost her battle with cancer, and they just had her funeral on Friday. I'd like to ask our listeners to pray for that family. Her name is Elizabeth Wiedner, and I posted that video. If you'll go to my Facebook page, and that video, I'm telling you what, you can't watch it and have dry eyes at the end. And this young lady, after she was diagnosed with cancer, just she was incredible. She started a foundation called Crowns Against Cancer. She was actually, after she was diagnosed, she was crowned the junior queen at the county fair, Effingham County Fair. And she used that platform that she was given as the county fair queen and started that foundation, Crowns Against Cancer. And anyway, she lost her battle with cancer this past week, and I just, you don't even know what to say, really. If you watch these videos, it's just so, I don't know, it pulls at your heart, to see what this young lady and her parents and her family and friends have all gone through. And, she faced it head on, was brave as can be, and now her parents and I think she's got 2 brothers are, left to deal with life without her. And I just ask that our listeners pray for her family. Again, her name is Elizabeth Wiedner. And, through a mutual friend, we've reached out and to the family to see if there might be some, financial assistance that Lester's Feet can help with, or if it's needed. I know that her mother, or I was told that her mother had to quit her job 6 years ago to care for Elizabeth. When she was first diagnosed, I think she was in 7th grade. She was in junior high, and did real aggressive chemo for 18 months, and they thought they would, hopefully take care of it with that, and it didn't work out that way. But it's just it's a heartbreaking story, and when I watched that video, I couldn't help but think, Terry, about Lester's feet and all these families that have to deal with these things. Some of the issues that the rest of us deal with are pretty trivial when you consider what some people are dealing with. So
no doubt
please
about
pray
it.
for the Elizabeth Wiedner family.
Yeah, no doubt about it. It's humbling, and even when we go to the hospitals and sit down with parents and grandparents and talk about their situation and their needs, I really struggle, honestly, with knowing what to say other than there is a lot of people that, whether they listen to the podcast or they help with Lester's Feet or follow Lester's Feet, there's just a body of people that care, that we don't really know what to do to make the situation easier. We just know that we want to help. And I think that's what kind of gives myself and the other board members of Lester's Feet the courage to go talk to them, because I'm at a loss for words sometimes when I sit in the lobby of these hospitals and try to talk to these families. I just get strength from knowing all of those thousands of people that bought a ticket just to help another family. So that means a lot. We appreciate everybody's support and prayers.
Yeah, for sure. And again, I encourage everybody to go to my Facebook page to find that video. I actually posted 2 of them, but there's several videos on this young lady, and I'm telling you what, they'll pull at your heart for sure.
All right. Well, I got a question about a buck here on my place, if you got a minute. I know
I got more in a minute.
Maybe other people are in this situation too. The target buck that we're looking for is now showing up on camera every night. I shouldn't say every night. 5 to 6 out of 7 nights. Occasionally he misses, but he's showing up about a half hour after dark. And what I'm thinking is going on here is I'm one property off from where he's bedding.
That sounds exactly right. And, you just need to wait for the weather front and, hunt him when you get that cold front. The bucks are hopefully moving a little bit early that evening.
Yeah, hopefully he gets up on his feet. The concern that I have is if I would have hunted this deer in this situation like I would have, say, 10 years ago, I would have thought, well, maybe he'll just slip up and be there early, and I go in and still try to hunt it, knowing that he's been nocturnal the last few, couple weeks, and I end up getting busted climbing down out of my stand when he's coming through 20 minutes, 30 minutes after dark. So,
Yep.
I'm just, I didn't even hunt this weekend. We got out of town with the kids, and just because I didn't want to tempt myself to put more pressure on the property and take a risk on it.
Yep. Actually, you took a trip to Tennessee, didn't you?
I did. We were scheduled originally to be in a softball tournament, but we had some health concerns with some of the injuries, so we decided to cancel that. And we jumped in the truck and drove down to Gatlinburg Pigeon Forge area. My son and my family. I'll be honest with you. After that last trip to Dollywood that we went to, and I saw how that there can be an amusement park, and let's face it, these businesses are there to take your money. They're extremely expensive and overpriced, but when you get there, I can see a business like that has 2 agendas to promote, and that is, number 1, America, and number 2, Jesus. I'll go give them my money when I don't have to worry about some LYBGN identification into something you're not, and all that other stuff that these other amusement parks get into with red shirt days and all that. When I've found a place that's like that, my family enjoys it, and we went and invested another trip down there.
Well, good deal. There's not too many places of them around like that around anymore.
Nope. So met a lot of good people. My son plays a lot of musical instruments. We stopped there, and he spent I don't know, over 2 hours going around playing about every instrument in this huge music store down there. And I was sitting there in the chair by the front door. They got a lot of antiques and stuff around, and was sitting there, and I was actually looking through my cell camera pictures, catching up from the night before, looking through all of it. And one of the guys that works there walked by, and we struck up a conversation. He didn't obviously recognize me, but he listens to the podcast, and then hollered at one of his buddies to come over, and we sat there and talked deer hunting for a while. So the guys at Music Outlet in Sevierville, Tennessee, are hopefully listening to the podcast on this episode. Tell them, give them a little shout out. But it was amazing just when you're sitting around waiting in lines for whether it was jam packed there this weekend. So you wait for everything. This morning we were waiting on breakfast, and I was there taking care of a couple things on the phone while the family went in and checked in. And the dude sitting on the tailgate of the truck beside me, we struck up a conversation about trucks, and he was asking about my Duramax. And so we started talking about it, and I told him about the deal that Chris Yates had. And by the end of that conversation, he thought it was a scam at first. I think that's what most people think of when you talk about Chris's deal, where he'll trade you a new Duramax the second year or every year for $5,000. By the end of the conversation, he was taking Chris's number and trying to get a hold of him today. So I don't know if Chris sold a truck today or not, but hopefully he did.
Well, I had a little bit of correspondence with Chris by text this week, and I think he's doing pretty good on the Chasing Giants clients we're sending him through the podcast.
Yep. So truck deliveries are getting a whole lot better. So if you're looking for a new truck, give Chris Yates a call. I was going to also ask our listeners for a little bit of a prayer request, but after you mentioned that about the sick girl losing her life, I wasn't going to say nothing, but I think God hears all of our prayers equally. I think that it's okay for us to ask our listeners to also pray for us because, speaking of Chris Yates and some of the other sponsors, whether people know it or not, kind of how Don and I got together is me doing a little bit of business work for him, and we're trying to navigate right now what to do with this podcast. To be fully transparent to everybody, we didn't expect it to grow this fast, and we tried to use the podcast to help some friends or business acquaintances of ours to promote their product or their line, and we've been open about different stuff that we recommend and stuff, but everybody's wanting us to create more content, expand, try to get videos on the podcast so we can explain some of these properties. Starting next year, we're going to have to navigate some of the sponsor stuff a little bit, but I hope that all of our listeners will continue to pray for us and hold us accountable, because we don't want to get into this, who are we promoting this week for the sake of making a buck. If we're going to grow this thing and continue to create content for our listeners, we can't keep flipping the bill ourselves for it. So it's a delicate situation where we want to do the right thing, but we also want to grow it.
Yeah, we're not going to change our foundation or our principles, but we're getting opportunities thrown at us, and we're just trying to navigate it the best we can. I'm very blessed to have Terry on board because he's got a much better business mind than I do. So I lean on him pretty heavy for some of these things, and we could definitely use guidance from the Lord as well.
So be patient with us. I mean, it's we try to help our friends where we can, but again, if we're going to continue to grow this to where you guys can get more tools to use, we're not in it for the money, but we can't bankroll it all the time either. So just keep it in your prayers for us. We want to try to navigate it and be respectful and be who we are and call out the garbage and when we need to. That's part of who we are.
Yep.
So have you started, before we go into the BioFarm segment, have you started actually creating your schedule for consulting clients yet this year?
Well, I'm trying to. In fact, I reached out to some of my clients this week. I'm creating a spreadsheet, and you know better than anyone, Terry, how disorganized I am most of the time. And I'm always flying by the seat of my pants. And I'm trying to get more organized because the demand for the consulting service is just about all I can handle. It's more than I can handle, actually. And I'm trying to be a lot more efficient with my time. So, I reached out to some of my clients this week, putting together a spreadsheet, exactly where their property is located, the acres, and all that information, their contact info. So I just want to throw out there that if you have contacted me about consulting and you're supposed to be on my consulting list, or even if you want to reach out for the first time, I'm starting that spreadsheet and working on it. And if I have not contacted you yet, please reach out to me by phone, email, whatever, and make sure that I've got you on my list, because I don't want to leave anyone out. I'm going to try to, I'm going to, when I visit a state, I want to be as efficient as possible, but at the same time, I want to kind of try to get the people I've already committed to taken care of first, because at some point I'm going to draw the line. I'm going to have more clients wanting me than I'm going to be able to handle. So we'll just do the best that I can.
Yep. So make sure you're reaching out to him, not only for that, but also the master classes. Both of those are going to fill up pretty fast. So we really haven't talked a lot about your hunting plans for October. Before we move on to the BioFarm segment, why don't you just talk a little bit about what your plan is here this coming week? We're in kind of that, getting into that mid-October, but I know for me, I'm just watching weather. I'm being patient until I have weather. What about you?
That's exactly what I'm doing, Terry. I've only got, I've shared on earlier podcasts that there's really only one buck here in Illinois that I found that I want to shoot. He's at least 5 years old, just a clean 5x5 that I think will score in the 170s. And I think my best chance to kill that deer is actually in November on a property where I've got a couple of stands for different wind directions. There's also another property nearby where I have a little bit of an opportunity early. It's a property that gets some pressure. So I feel that if I'm going to kill him on that property, I need to do so early. But I need a pretty much a straight north wind to hunt the only stand I've got on that property. And thus far, we have not had that. So if we get a north wind this week, I'll definitely hunt that stand. If we don't, I'll probably just sit on the sidelines and wait till we do. And if we get the first time we get a really good cold front, I'll probably head back to Iowa. There's one more stand I want to hang over there before November. So I'll probably go hunt an evening or two and then hang that stand and then stay away and probably until about the 1st of November.
Yeah. There's so much information on the internet right now about, I see it all the time about, getting aggressive and running in and finding the bed, bumping the buck out of the bed. And it's so dangerous. Everybody's kind of got their style and what works for them. But if you've listened to this podcast very much, you know that we're going to take very extreme caution to put the plan together, just like Tate or Amos and Amos's son did, to go in and try to make sure those conditions are right before we try to slip in there and kill them.
Right.
So that's
run and gun stuff may be good for public hunting or if you've got all kinds of acreage, but for most of us, that's just a good way to bump the buck to your neighbor and never see him again.
Yeah. So keep that in mind, but we're going to probably play it pretty cautious until we get some decent cold weather or get into that pre-rut. which is not going to be that far away. It's October 10th, and by the end of October, they're starting to feel a little bit froggy. But we got a little bit of time to be patient yet. So with that, why don't we move on to the BuyAFarm.com property of the week?
BuyAFarm.com is your source for farm, recreational properties, rural homes, and more. Now, here is Don Higgins with this week's featured property.
Okay, this week's featured property is a 78-acre tract in Perry County, Illinois. This tract, the 78 acres, lays right against State Highway 14. It'd actually be on the north side of Highway 14 between Mulkeytown and DuQuoin. There's some marketable timber on the property. On the west end, there's a couple of sloughs that flood. If you look at the video and the photos on the website right now, you're going to see that very easily. So there's probably some waterfowl hunting that could be done on that end of the property, but primarily this is going to be a better property for deer and turkey. Just a little bit to the east of the property is a little muddy river. And then on the west edge of the property is Reese Creek. So, you got a couple of waterways on each end of the property, and we know how deer like to travel in waterways. If you're interested in this property, you can call Mark Kennedy. Mark's phone number is 618-924-1747. And you can go to BuyAFarm.com and look for the 78 acres in Perry County, Illinois as well. But one thing I'm going to throw out there, Terry, is that, right now the real estate market is red hot. And properties are selling like crazy, sometimes for more than asking price. And I was talking to one of the guys at BuyAFarm this week, and he said the biggest problem they're having right now is that they're selling the property so fast they can't find new listings quick enough. They find a new listing and boom, it's gone. So there's not a whole lot on the BuyAFarm.com website. I mean, there are several properties, don't get me wrong, but nothing like you would typically see. So if you've got any interest at all in buying a property, you need to act quick if you find something that you like.
Yeah, it's definitely a interesting dynamic right now, and I could get off on a tangent of economics for everybody. That's kind of what my day job is, but good grief, man, do I have some concerns. So if you're wanting to make a move on some property, I think it's even though the prices are high, they move fast. I think it's a very, very good time to do that. So make sure you're reaching out to your real estate agent or BuyAFarm.com and ask them about the type of property that you're looking for. Even if it's not listed, tell them what they're looking for. So if they run across it, they can get with you quickly, maybe before somebody else puts a bid in on something. I think that's the biggest thing when working with a real estate agent is communicating to them ahead of time what you're looking for, so they know what to keep their eye out on for them, right?
That's for sure. A lot of good properties never make it to the internet. Most good properties do not make it to the internet. They get the agent has a list of potential buyers, and that's the first thing he does is he contacts them before putting it out for the public. So if you're looking to buy and you don't have an agent, you need to get one and let them know exactly what you're looking for.
All right, good deal. Well, moving on tonight, do you got some questions for us to talk about?
I do. I picked out 4 different submissions for tonight. We'll see what we got time for.
All right.
The first one is from Matthew Montag from Goshen, Ohio. Matthew says, my question is, do you ever use scents when deer hunting? For example, do you ever use doe and heat estrus to draw in a buck that is seeking? Why or why not? Thank you for putting on the podcast. Matthew, I seldom use scents while hunting. The reason for it is the same reason I don't use calls. I think most mature bucks have, they played the game long enough. They know every trick in the book. And when they smell that, it's just telling them that, hey, there's a hunter over there. Now, when I do use scents, I use something that cannot be bought just down at the local Walmart or, the local archery shop or wherever. I like scents that I have to order them. And the reason for that is I don't want to be using a scent and have a buck come along and smell it that he smelled last week because somebody else was using the same scent. And about the only time that I use scents while hunting is when I'm in really thick cover, like the Joey buck last year. When I'm in really thick cover and I'm really limited to shooting lanes, and I need a buck to stop it at an exact spot if I'm going to get a shot at him, I'll go to that spot and I'll dump out a whole bottle of scent. And, you know, when that buck comes through, he's going to get a whiff of it and he's going to lock up. And if you see or hear him coming, you know, you can have your release on your string and you can be ready when he pulls up and stops and gets that first whiff. And before he has a chance to react, like the Joey buck, I mean, that buck stepped in that opening and he locked up, but it was too late. I seen him coming and I was at full draw and got a shot off. To be honest, if I would not have done that, I don't think I would have killed that deer. I think he would have trotted right through that opening and right on through. That's about the only time that I'll use them. My favorite scent is Smokies. I guess I also use them on the rope scrapes, but that's not so much for hunting. That's for photos with trail cameras. Smokies got several different scents. I get this question all the time. Which one of Smoky scents should I use? I'm telling you, it don't matter. Whatever he's got available, buy it. Buy the cheapest. I don't care. Buy any of them because they all work. I've used every one of them at one time or another on ropes and such with cameras, and every one of them draws in the bucks. And I really can't see that one works any better than another. But that's how I use it.
Yep, fantastic. Great question.
Anything to add there, Terry?
I probably use them a little bit more than you, but I don't. I used to worry about like dragging a rag or a tampon or something that would hold scent behind my boot and, you know, making a drag in. I don't use that as much, but I have had good success in putting them in areas where I need a deer to stop. And in that case, I do like using them for that. But I don't do the scent drag stuff as much anymore. I think as you've kind of taught me a little bit more and more about what a mature buck is doing on the downwind side of a bedding area, if you're in the right spot, it's really not what you need, if that makes sense.
No, and I'd hate to guess over the years how many bottles of scent I've bought. I mean, I could probably fill a 55-gallon barrel with all the little bottles that I've used over the years whenever I was, you know, younger and learning and trying every trick in the book. And it just never paid off. And, yeah, the other thing that you got to consider is, you know, you put your scent out there and that scent is going to carry on the wind. And you're dependent on that buck to get downwind of that scent and smell it and come in. Well, your scent, as you sit there in your stand, it's going in the same direction as that scent is.
Yeah.
So there's a very good chance he could wind you before he hits that scent. So it's pretty tricky. So I just described the only way I use it, and that's to stop a buck in thick cover.
Yeah, it's just I don't know. I guess the best way I can say it is I have more confidence now and have been more successful killing bucks 4 or 5 years or older when I focused on being the right spot, which is the downwind side of bedding, than going blindly into a funnel or to where bucks run typically during the rut and putting a scent trail out and having them put their nose down and come into me. I have more confidence being in the right spot than I do using a scent. Now, using a scent in the right spot, I don't know that it hurts you, but I think being in the right spot's more important.
No doubt about it.
Okay.
All right, our next question comes from Ethan Royer from Goshen, Indiana.
Okay.
Ethan says, Don, I am curious about how much consideration you give to present and future timber value on your consulting properties. I'm a hunter who is in the logging industry in the Midwest, and I've seen a variety of approaches to habitat management. I admit to being uncomfortable when clients want me to harvest every merchantable tree in the entire woods down to 10 to 12 inches, and then hinge cut even more small trees. wouldn't it be better to have a timber harvest, say, every 10 to 15 years, along with cutting undesirable weed trees in between harvests, instead of basically clear cutting the entire woods and ruining timber potential for 40 plus years? Doesn't sound timber management produce good deer habitat, or is it impossible to be good stewards of timber resources and create good habitat in the process? Thanks for weighing in on this long and confusing question. I think that's a great question, Ethan. And in fact, I have promoted for a long time being good stewards of the land, and we can do that while also improving the habitat for deer. Whenever I consult on a property that has timber, there's a number of different approaches that I sometimes take. And, one of them is on a bigger tract for sure, is that I'll suggest, okay, you cut this section of the property this year, you wait 5 years and you cut that section, then you wait another 5 years and cut a different section. And then you've always got timber in different stages of regrowth. And I think that's a lot better than coming in and wiping out the entire property and then it all matures at the same time down the road.
Right.
And if you can stagger it out and diversify it, I think that's a much better approach.
Sure.
One of the big, my objections to hinge cutting is two things. First of all, most people doing hinge cutting, they're doing it in the wintertime or early spring before there's no leaves on the trees, and they can't identify an oak from a maple, let alone a red oak from a white oak. They're just out there indiscriminately just chopping down trees. And I'm totally against that. I think we can manage our timbers for timber harvest as well as for deer. Now, when I do cut a timber for deer habitat, I probably cut it a little bit harder than most loggers would like, because I want to make sure that sunlight gets in.
Right.
And I think you've alluded to it in your question here, but when the timber harvest is done, there's going to be a lot of tree species that are basically, worthless as far as timber value and wildlife value. So, you can go in there and then, clear out, like, say, elm trees or box elder,
locust,
things like that are never going to have much wildlife value or timber value. Just cut them out and let that sunlight come in and produce browse for the deer to feed on. So, I agree with you for the most part, Ethan, that, we need to be managing those timbers for timber as well as for deer cover. But I'm probably going to be more aggressive than most, foresters or loggers would want.
Well, let me clarify your statement there a little bit, because I think what you are trying to say, but maybe it's not coming out that way, and I might be wrong, so you can tell me that's not what you meant. But if a logger goes in and he takes, let's face it, the loggers are going in for very select type woods. Your walnuts, your cherries, your poplars, your oaks, right? They go in and take those big mature straight trees. It's going to leave the tops down usually, but what the logger doesn't want is all of the scrub trees, which again have no benefit for wildlife either. So I think a balanced approach within the means of what the customer or landowner needs out of the sale of the timber, it has to be a plan that everybody's on the same page of. It's not to say that everything that you would do on your home farm is going to be right for what one of your clients is. I've seen you with your clients, and you're talking with them about what their goals are, how they're paying for the farm, what kind of return do they need, and that's all kind of taken into account with what you recommend, right?
Absolutely. And you bring up another great point, Terry, is that there's a lot of loggers who don't care about the wildlife value. All they care about is the timber. And it's just the opposite of what Ethan's pointing out here. He's saying that people only care about the deer habitat and not the timber. Well, it works the other way around just as well. I've been on properties where a logger has come in and he's just wanted to selectively take, I'm only going to take the oaks and the walnuts, and sometimes just the walnuts. And there may be all kinds of nice straight, sycamores, cottonwoods, soft maple and things that could be cut and harvested. And no, it's not prime timber by any means, but that's pallet wood or shipping crate wood that does have a use. It does have value, and getting it out of there and opening up the canopy is fantastic for the wildlife. So we can't put all the blame on just the deer hunters wanting to create better deer habitat. The loggers are just as much to blame. There's got to be a balance, as you suggested, Terry, where, you know, they're taking the prime trees, certainly, but they're not just walking away from the stuff that they're not going to make as much for their time invested as they do the prime stuff.
And I guess this is coming from me, which is a guy that I still, as much woodworking as I do, I still have a hard time in the winter with no leaves on the tree identifying tree species by bark. There's just some that it really puzzles me. I'm a little bit better when there's leaves on the ground. So, you know, the guys that are, you know, and I'm also the kind of guy that if I need to steer a deer a little bit to get him within 30 yards of my tree stand, I'm okay hinge cutting a tree. The balance that we're talking about is these guys that are pro hinge cutting that just devastate an entire woods and say I'm creating bedding, or the guys that go in and drop every tree. There has to be a little bit better of a plan than just going crazy and having 3 tanks of gas and a chainsaw go haywire.
Yeah, and there's extreme both directions.
Right.
From the deer hunter standpoint, from the logger standpoint. So, you know, you gotta weigh the goals for the property, you know, the landowner and his desires, and kind of make things balance.
It's easy for us to sit back and say, well, we do it differently when we're not the one paying the bill for the property too. I mean,
right.
That, you know, guys are, you know, making the decision to acquire or have the ground, and, you know, might need to make some money quick. It's every situation's a little different.
Right. And, you know, that needs to be taken into consideration. It's not my place to say, don't hinge cut. If you bought the property, do what you want, but I can tell you why I'm against it, and then you can make your decision.
All right. Great question.
Yep. Next one is from Stephen Skipper from Georgetown, South Carolina. Stephen says, greetings. Yep. We're all over today. Ohio, Indiana, now South Carolina.
All right.
Stephen says, greetings, Don and Terry. Hope all is well in the world of chasing giants. Love the podcast and the info you share with us. 2 quick questions. First, Don, since you run so many trail cams over multiple properties in several states, do you have them and their locations recorded in case you forget about one and or worse, something were to happen to you? Running 30-plus Reconyx or other brand cameras, we are talking well over $10,000 in cameras. I know I have run across 1 or 2 that I've forgotten about and left there for a couple of years. Second question, what type of video camera do you use to record your hunts? Thanks for all of your knowledge and service to the hunting community. God is good. Sincerely, Stephen. Stephen, yeah, I do have a spreadsheet. List every camera by location. And I also will note next to it the last time I checked that camera. If I didn't, I guarantee you I'd be forgetting some. So that's the best way for me to keep track of them is just keep that spreadsheet updated. Anytime I move a camera, you know, I'm changing the location on my spreadsheet. Anytime I check a camera, I'm updating the date that it was last checked. And it's pretty simple, but without it, I'd be lost. Second question, what type of video camera do you use to record your hunts? I've got a Sony. I can't even remember the model number.
I was waiting for this.
4K. You're not surprised at all, are you, Terry?
I was like, oh, I bet he doesn't even know the model of it.
I think it's an NX something, NX80 maybe.
So, full disclosure, there's a very smart guy named Steve Shields that Don and I both use camcorder style cameras, and Steve sets them up to where we just have to hit the red button. Outside of that, we don't get into it. You just upgraded. Actually, the MEL footage was on your new camera.
Right.
I'm still using a Canon XA series, but you upgraded. But yeah, Steve kind of handles that for both of us. We take him our camera and he sets it up with all the settings and does all that for us. We do not film with DSLRs. When we self-film, it's a little bit harder for amateurs like us to deal with zoom, focus, and everything. It's more of a two-handed job. Steve, when Steve did the video of his buck that he killed on your property last year, his footage was really good. I don't know how he does all that, but he's more of a professional than we are when it comes to running a camera by a long shot.
Absolutely. I'm not a techie video guy. And here's the advice I'm going to give you if you're going to self-film your hunts, or even if you're just getting into video and you're at the beginning stage. First of all, stick with two brands, either by a Sony or a Canon. Those two brands are hands down the ones you want. Second, you want a 4K camera. And that's just, I don't even know what 4K means. It's the quality of the footage, basically, is the best way to put it. So you want either a Sony or a Canon that's filming in 4K. Yeah. And if you get that, you should be good to go.
You buy the best camera you can afford. Everybody's going to have a different price point. The takeaways Steve has told me over the last couple of years is buy the best one you can. 4K is great. The more expensive the camera, the better it does in low light. And audio is really important. So, make sure you invest in your boom mic and your coontail or whatever you put on it, or cordless mics if you're wanting top quality stuff. But the beauty of 4K is you don't have to zoom in really far for your shot. You can kind of stay back, make your window bigger. As the deer stops, you don't have to be right on it, so you miss the impact shot. And then if it's in 4K, whoever edits it can zoom in and reposition that to where your the frame in the produced video shows up a whole lot more. But you get outside of that advice, I'm lost. I'm a hit the red button and hope I get it type guy.
I was just getting ready to say I should have let you answer that question, Terry, because you was a lot more helpful than me.
Yeah, it's always surround yourself with somebody who knows a lot more about it than you, and for us, that's Steve Shields. So, although I got to pick on Steve, every time he has a problem with his cell camera, he calls me, and I'm like, I told him this week, I was like, when I am your tech support, something is wrong in this world. So he was laughing at that because I am not a techie person, but I end up working on his cell cameras every time he has a problem with it.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy because Steve, he can run $100,000 video camera, and then he calls you for probably a $200 trail camera.
Exactly. So that's what he said.
So he is the video guru.
He said when I have a problem with a video camera, I'm his guy, but trail cameras, yeah. he doesn't work with them as quite as much. So, all right, well, we got time for one more if you got one.
I got one. All right. The last one comes from Josh Brewington from Batavia, Iowa. Josh says, "Hey, Don, have you ever been frustrated going through the hunting season or after because you have not gotten the movement or seen the amount of deer you usually do each year? I hunt in southeast Iowa, and last year we had an off year. We saw hardly any deer, and if I'm not mistaken, even the neighbors had a rough year. We did not have any disease going around. What do you think the issue is? And what kept you optimistic after a rough year? Thank you for all the knowledge you share." Josh, that's a really good question. I think last year the big issue was that it got really warm there in early November when you typically see the most buck movement. I just happened to shoot Mel October 30th when we had a cold front come through before it heated up and stayed warm for, I think, at least 2 weeks or so, maybe longer. I think that the weather, as much as anything, is what curtailed that daylight movement last year. How do I deal with it? Well, it's come with maturity, to be honest. When I was younger, it frustrates the crap out of me to go hunting, one or two times and not see a deer. I just knew I was doing something wrong and needed to change. But the older I've got, I realized that there's deer hunting and there's deer killing. And the older I've got, I've become more of a deer hunter and less of a deer killer. Although I probably kill more now than I ever have, but I get just as much enjoyment out of a morning hunt in the woods where you watch the sunrise, you watch the nocturnal critters coming back to their beds, the coons, the possums, whatever. And you watch the woods wake up, you see a squirrel crawl out of its nest and stretch and come to life for the day. And there's, as you get older, those are the things you appreciate more. And, I've got a saying, it's about the chase, not the kill. And when I was younger, that was definitely not the case. And I'm sure a lot of guys relate to that. But I'm also, without a doubt, I think a lot of the older listeners can probably relate to what I'm saying here, is that the older you get, the chase becomes more important. And seeing deer is great. It's fantastic. That's why we're out there. That's our goal. But just because you're not seeing deer doesn't mean you can't have a good time. And how do you stay positive? Well, you make your own attitude. You can be positive or you can be negative, and you can kill big deer and have a negative attitude. And, when it comes to hunting, it's such a blessing, just to be in good health and be able to get out of bed on a frosty morning and, dress yourself, wake up in a warm bed, get out there and have a place to hunt and watch that sunrise. So I think it's all a matter of mindset more than anything. You have any advice there, Terry?
You just have to appreciate what it is. You're in a country and a area that lets you have the freedom to hold a weapon in your hand and go out and try to pursue and to harvest an animal, and be thankful for even the opportunity on a frosty morning to you be sitting in there in the tree stand right at daylight, and a squirrel or an animal come through and it's sounding like a Mack truck, and you finally pick up what it is, and it's a 1 pound little critter, not a big booner. So there's nothing that gets me fired up is a frosty morning hearing animals on the forest floor. I think that's just one of the coolest things ever, that the woods can be that quiet, and then just the amount of noise that little animals can make. It just gets my heart pumping. I love it.
Yeah, I do too. And if deer comes by, it's just a bonus.
Yeah. So it comes with maturity. I'm not very mature yet, but one day I will be.
Well, I'm still growing up myself. Just ask my wife.
Yep. All right. That sounds good. Those were some good questions tonight.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of questions submitted and some really good ones. So just encourage everybody to keep sending them in. And the more I have to pick through, the more I like it. And I try to mix them up, as you can tell this week. We had 4 questions that came from 4 different states, but they were all different, different topics. And that's kind of the way I pick them. Occasionally, like we might do a food plot episode where we pick nothing but food plot questions, but most of the time I try to mix it up.
So you're still sending a free T-shirt to everyone that we use on air. So there'll be 4 T-shirts go out this week. You submit your questions. We've had a lot of new listeners not know how to submit questions, but you go to chasinggiants.com, which will route you to higginsoutdoors.com. Click on the podcast tab at the top, and at the bottom of that page, you submit your question with your shirt size and your address. We don't use that stuff on air, but that gives us instructions on where to send your shirt the week after we use it. Now, speaking of apparel, we will have a new shirt this coming year, kind of alluding to what we're going to end up doing with some sponsor stuff on the back. Working on that right now. And while I was in Tennessee, our friend Stephanie, who does a lot of embroidery for Higgins Outdoors, Chasing Giants, Lester's Feet, Real World, super lady that helps us, a really good friend of my wife Casey and I's, but she gave us some samples of some new color Chasing Giants hats. So Don and I need to talk about how we're going to do that, but we'll probably post a couple pictures of those in the next couple days. We're not sure if we're just going to order a bunch or do pre-sales or whatever, but you guys have asked for more alternatives with stuff, so we want to try to do that for you. We don't make hardly any money on this stuff, but not while we do it either. So keep an eye out for that and some new apparel stuff.
Yep.
All right. Well, that's all I got tonight. So hopefully we get some cold weather come through and I can actually get back in the stand again.
Well, that's what I'm waiting on, too. If it doesn't turn cold next week, we won't have much to talk about.
Yeah. Well,
we'll find something.
Before we close, I do want to tell you a funny story, though. We were
okay.
We stopped into Bass Pro on the way out of Pigeon Forge today, and there's a Bass Pro right as you get on the interstate. And we went in there and was walking around and grabbing a couple supplies and stuff, and my son walks over to the magazine rack, and right there front and center, they still had the issue of You with Mel on the stand. There's another issue that's came out since then, but they still had 2 issues of North American Whitetail on the rack, and he calls you Uncle Don. You don't know that, but that's what my son Jonathan calls you. He's like, "Oh, look, Uncle Don." Well, he was flipping through the pages of it, and I had forgotten about it. There was actually a whole page ad about Chasing Giants podcast in that issue also. And he's like, "Dad, you finally made it. Your picture's in North American Whitetail." And I'm like, "Son, my picture is not North American Whitetail for anything I've done." But you should have seen you should have seen all the people saying, "You're a North American Whitetail?" Because it was right next to the checkout line. I'm like, "No, just leave it alone. Shut up, son." Talking about getting embarrassed really quick.
Yeah.
All right. Well, with that, why don't you check us out with our sponsors? Thanks for everybody listening, your support. Please like and follow and leave a comment. We appreciate all the support that you've given to Don and I in this venture. It really means a lot.
We want to thank our sponsors, BuyAFarm.com, Victory Chevrolet, 360 Hunting Blinds, Real World Wildlife Products, Matthews Archery, Lone Wolf Tree Stands, WildlifeFarming.com, Quiet Cat, and Vortex Optics. Hope you have a great week, everyone. Be sure to give prayer to the Wiedner family who just lost their daughter in the past week. Appreciate it. Thank you.